attending the GuestDriven Leveraging Profiles and Guest Engagement in Mobile webinar. GuestDriven, our newest GMS partner, will provide Roomkey PMS with the mobile component for our guest engagement tools. We are very excited to have Tomas Schmidt from GuestDriven with us here today. Before we get started, I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping points. Everyone will be automatically muted during this webinar. And for the question portion, if you could please use the chat tool within the webinar tool, and we will address all the questions at the end of the webinar. Okay, so GuestDriven. GuestDriven is the next generation in guest engagement. They will help you engage with your guests before, during, and after their stay. They will help you gain valuable insights into your guests and help you increase your bottom line with check-in upgrades and offers. Today we have Tomas Schmidt, who is the Chief Product Officer at GuestDriven. Tomas is a product and technology operations executive with expertise in defining strategy, development, partnerships, and execution of new technology-driven products and services. And with an extensive background and varied background in technology, having worked with a diverse group from startups to Fortune 500 companies. So without further ado, I will change the screen over and let Tomas have control. Tomas, welcome.
Thanks, Nev. Let me just switch over here. Okay, let's see, make sure everybody can see. All right, so we should be all set. So first of all, thank you everyone for joining me in today's presentation on leveraging profiles and guest engagement in mobile. Profiles and guest engagement are core of what we do at GuestDriven, and I sincerely hope this session will provide you a bit more insight and a better understanding of how we do this and how this can help elevate the experience you provide to your guests and enhance your bottom line at the same time. So let's dive right in. So in order to understand mobile guest engagement, I think it's really important that we first have a look at see what's happening in the state of the market as a whole. And we see here in terms of total internet traffic, mobile has now, more importantly, mobile apps have really surpassed desktop usage, and they're almost at 55% combined. Mobile is, in today's world, an essential part of the whole travel experience for consumers and travelers. And recent surveys indicate that approximately 44% of travelers plan their upcoming trip with a smartphone or a tablet. And in fact, 61% of those travelers have purchased air travel or booked a hotel on a tablet. The overall number is about 51% on a mobile device. So why do travelers love mobile? Well, primarily it's because it's pretty easy and accessible. Most of us today carry a mobile device with us at all times. If we leave it at home, we usually go back and get it. And so the access is easy, the interfaces are easy and simple, and there are more and more apps available for travel today. So today's travelers really enjoy creating and sharing content on social media as well, and that's not restricted to just leisure travelers. So we can see that business travelers are actually fairly active at this as well. And so who is this mobile travel audience? I wanted to set the stage and look a little bit deeper at this. So in terms of mobile travel audience, we see that 40% of the demographic is comprised of 18 to 34-year-olds. And otherwise, these are known as millennials, many of which you have heard of. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, or we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. The other thing to note is that while the distribution by income is fairly broad, a fairly substantial group of these travelers are fairly affluent, actually, with 27% having an income in excess of $100,000. So who are these millennials? Well, first of all, there are no really precise dates in terms of definition as to when the generation starts or ends. It is also defined, or millennials are also defined as being Gen Y, or the children of the Gen X. And if you look up the definition of a millennial on Wikipedia, you'll see that it's defined as the abbreviation for millennial generation. And in general, that means those individuals born between the years of 1980 to 2000. What we do know is that critics often describe them as being a class of self-centered, self-absorbed, selfie-snapping 20-somethings. But if you really look around, you can generally spot them pretty much everywhere. They're holding a smartphone in hand, and they could be hanging out with friends or waiting at a bus stop or waiting for a flight. They could be sitting at a MacBook or using their MacBook in a lobby of your hotel, but generally inseparable from their smartphone device. And so why should you care? Well, the average millennial is now taking more than 9 trips a year. And millennials are 62% more likely to extend a business trip with vacation time. Almost 25% of millennials surveyed would actually prefer some type of leave status as a benefit of their travel. And so millennials are more likely to take advantage of amenities offered by hotels. So far sounds like a perfect audience, right? To engage with as a hotel guest via a mobile device. So what does this all mean for travel and hospitality? Well, millennials are 23% more interested in traveling abroad than previous generations. And so this generation of travelers is expected to actually reach about 78 million by 2030 and really outnumber the baby boomers quite considerably. And in fact, the UN estimates that about 20% of all international travel today, or about 200 million travelers, are young people. And this is generating about $100 billion in annual revenue, and this has jumped up about 30% since 2007. So there is really no better segment to represent the modern traveler, if you think about it, than the millennial. And this is a segment that is rapidly growing in terms of numbers and impact to the travel industry. And not only is this segment rapidly growing, they are expected to reach about 50% of all travelers. So technology has fundamentally changed the nature and expectation of travelers. First, they grew up with technology and are very tech-savvy, obviously. Modern travelers are dependent on their mobile devices throughout all stages of travel, and in fact often prefer online communication over human interaction and are typically extremely impatient when it comes to immediacy of service. And so finally, they're also integrally connected to social media and are as connected in receiving it as they are in pushing it out. And this is just a very different breed of traveler than we saw even 3 to 5 years ago. And really what differentiates them further is the focus on deals and discounts. And 31% of spending is generally made by deals. So they like the idea of a deal or a special or a perky type of offer, and far more emotional in terms of brand loyalty. So not only are millennials a powerful consumer segment, the things they care about are also quite different. And they care about experiences. They're mobile, they're social, and they move just at a much faster pace. In addition, they're also very loyal and supportive of brands that they like. So in the travel industry, we need to be better about addressing their needs and interests through all stages of the travel experience. And so this is important because traditional requirements of a successful hotel, like a bed, a great bathroom, flat screen, they're really no longer sufficient for driving guest satisfaction. And so with more options than before, and consumer interest being even more important, loyalty is really hard to engender. So in this landscape, hotels are focused on unique details to differentiate properties, and typically special amenities and unique decor and art exhibits and things like that. And so we're seeing hotels increasingly differentiating their properties through these type of experiential details to engage their customers, get them to talking about it. And what we're seeing is that even the major brands are on top of this trend, with many of them launching boutique brands over the last few years, whether it's Hilton's Conrad or Intercontinental's Indigo, Wyndham's Trip, Radisson Blu, and so forth. So what we're seeing are a number of trends that are being driven by millennials. This is very much the now generation, now being instant and flexibility of service. And since individuals falling into this category are also labeled as such, millennials seek immediate gratification, and this holds true when traveling, in particular during hotel stays. So it can't be ascribed as want so much as need. They really are used to this instantaneity, and that's really important to them. And so data is a real big part of this. The next thing is real-time information. So another reason this group is called the now generation, because they demand information as it occurs. So this ties into social media and real-time responsibility or responsiveness, and things like Twitter and Facebook obviously are integral component in the lives of these millennials, who also upload regularly and keep in touch in real time with their friends and colleagues. And they expect this from any business that they interact with, and this is really important to understand, and that includes the hotel. And so they want to be able to engage in the same way with the hotel, the same way that they do with their friends. The next one is peer review. So millennials grew up bombarded with advertising, and they're far too sophisticated to be tricked, basically, by marketers. And so they turn to peers for expert opinion. And on average, a millennial will check 10.2 roughly sources before making a booking. And so sites such as TripAdvisor and Yelp are being obviously very common, and are a very powerful tool to gauge opinions about hotels. And so this is really an important thing. Even though these review sites may not be as professional, let's say, as the New York Times, there's a certain level of authenticity and trust in a friend's review or a peer review. They are very social creatures, whether online or offline, and millennials, as such, more so than previous generations, concerned about their unable to dialogue, interact with others because of this reliance on texting. The reality is that they, in fact, do connect with their peers in a much broader way than previous generations did. And so it's just a different medium, and they use social media to do that. And the whole idea is that they're concerned about these feeds and the fear of missing out. So this is why they need this, this idea of sharing content. It allows them to validate the fun that they're having with their peers' approval in the form of whether it's a like on a Facebook status or check-in, and this gives them a much broader reach than previous generations. And so while members of previous age brackets tend to inform friends by a phone call saying, I had a great stay at the XYZ hotel, a millennial will post a picture and a review and can easily reach thousands of people just in one shot. So millennials are sociable also offline. So this is not just a group that likes to share on social media, but also they actually like to travel with other people. And in so much as 58% prefer to travel with friends, and that's quite a bit higher than previous generations. The next trend is they're really affecting the booking structure. So compared to previous generations, millennials heavily influence technology and in terms of that. And so what's happened is that the booking window is now is much shorter than it used to be. And so millennials tend to make snap decisions in real time due to all the stuff that we just talked about. And so it's really critical for our hotels to offer the most up-to-date, real-time, accurate information in terms of what they're offering to those guests. And again, goes back to the immediacy and real-time sort of perspective of millennials. And lastly, it's the idea of required essentials and wanted amenities. And millennials are not the travelers that their parents were. Their first experience with travel may not have been in a hotel, but rather in a hostel. It could have been with backpacks, and so they're okay with that. The basics of that were, a clean bed, a hot shower, and free Wi-Fi. And so, they understand that, but what they don't understand is if they're paying $500 a night for a hotel, why they should be paying $20 for Wi-Fi. So it's really something that they have become used to as being a requirement, really, not just an amenity. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about collection of guest data now that we understand who the target audience is and what the market is like, and how the traveler is evolving. So in today's world, data collection in terms of that guest data is not particularly well structured. So for instance, if a guest comes in at check-in and tells the front desk agent that he prefers a quiet room on a high floor, let's say away from the elevator, and he may also mention that he tends to get cold at night and would like an extra blanket. So what happens is this information is typically used just for that one stay. The front desk manager might put that guest in that high room and makes a request to housekeeping to provide that guest with the additional blanket. But there's really no where to record that data. This is a loyal guest, and that guest is going to have to retell that story the next time they check in, even though this may be the 3rd or 4th or 10th or 20th time they've been in that property. And so this is not a really good way to treat that loyal customer, if you would. And even worse, if this guest booked the reservation on an OTA, and typically you wouldn't have that email, it's unlikely to know whether that's even a returning guest. So this is not a very good, repeatable experience for potentially loyal guests. Another example is you could have a business traveler and ask the concierge for a recommendation for, let's say, a local wine bar because you like wine tasting, and that concierge gives you that, makes a note of that in the system, but that information is typically lost, and it may not make its way into the CRM. So when there's a next wine event in town, you miss that opportunity to invite that guest back and tell them, hey, this would have been a great experience for you, and here's a really appreciative, tailored offer for that guest. So as a result, hotels are missing out on these best opportunities to draw back guests that might appeal to their interests. So why guest profile is critical? Well, we know that through, again, market research, that online personalized ad can result in a 9-fold increase in click-through performance over a non-personalized marketing message. So imagine the impact you are making by delivering a personalized service or marketing message to that guest on the property, and that's either before or after their stay. So let's look at the guest journey as it relates to collecting guest data. So this journey really starts at the time that the guest is making their booking. And traditionally, until that guest arrives at the property, so from the time that they book that room until the time that they arrive is kind of a dark period, short of the booking confirmation. So there's usually no communication between the hotel and guest. And so this is a really great opportunity for the hotel to start engaging with that guest, start to build that profile on the guest, whether it's through getting that guest to join a loyalty program or to do a mobile check-in in advance and offer them upgrades. And the idea is that you want to learn about your guest in advance of the stay so that once they arrive at your property, you're better able to tailor to their needs and, of course, in a better position to offer them more personalized offers that they're more likely to take advantage of. And then, of course, post-stay, you can solicit feedback and reviews, which are, of course, going to be beneficial, providing that the guests had a wonderful time, and then use that to retarget them for their next stay. And so we know that in today's world, hotels are certainly aware of this and want to know everything about their guests, whether it's relationship status, income, allergies, what type of toothpaste you like, how you like your eggs, basically everything, because that's obviously very helpful to making a better guest experience. So why is this important? Industry research shows us that companies that personalize content and promotions report lists as high as 40% in terms of increased sales over those that don't. So a mobile guest application or a mobile guest engagement app, such as the one that we do at GuestDriven, is a great way to provide deeper insights into those guest preferences and behaviors in real time. And of course, there are integrated tools for campaigning and interacting with the guest at each and every stage of travel. But you have to look at this as guest engagement goes just beyond that smartphone app. And it really needs to be part of a holistic 360-degree view across multiple screens, multiple devices, and both from a guest experience or guest perspective as well as a hotel perspective. And so there are different interactions across the different stages of that guest journey, whether it's during the pre-stay where the guest could be offered mobile check-in upgrades or some way to personalize their stay. Then, of course, during the stay at the hotel where the guest can make requests, where the hotel has to be able to respond to those requests, and hopefully learning and adapting in response to the new guest information that is being collected, all the way through the checkout, where it's about rating that experience and sharing the experience the guest had, responding to feedback from the hotel side, and promoting the next day for that guest. So we look at mobile relationship management as kind of three fairly easy steps: identifying, segmenting, engaging. So here in this example, We have Mark Smith, and Mark is a millennial, of course. He happens to be a music producer. He is part of the loyalty program that, let's say, our hotel has. He's earned already 22,000 points as it reached platinum status, and we know that he happens to like sushi, cafes, and running. So based on this information, we could, in fact, already target and send very targeted messages to Mark. That, however, is not particularly scalable because if you have a large property with hundreds of rooms, this is really just, it might be a little bit overwhelming. So what you want to do is you want to be able to segment your guests. You want to segment them based on certain specific data points. And so you could create a category of new guests, let's say. That would be those guests that had sessions, let's say, between 0 and 10 sessions on the platform. And then you could create another segmentation. You could call it ready to monetize, and those would be defined as, let's say, people that had more than 15 sessions and used the app, let's say, 1 day ago, and have done a couple searches, but have not actually made any in-app purchases. And you can create many segments, of course. And then once you have those segments defined, then you engage based on those segmentations. So let's dig a little bit deeper just so everybody understands what's involved. So on the identity side, you want to understand your guests. And so what does that entail? Demographic data, social data, behavioral data, in-app data, so the way that the guest is using the app, and historical data. So, how many times has that guest been in your hotel, and so forth. And the reason for this is determine which guests are engaging with some of the key features in your app, so the things that you're offering, and how are they engaging with specific calls to action. So you may be doing a specific promotion that asks them to book something or to create a reservation or make a purchase. So how are they reacting to that? And all of this to determine how this is driving to what you're trying to do in terms of KPIs with your mobile app. The second part is segmentation. So we want to create segments that are based on a combination of filters on the data that's being collected, and then group that into key groups. So you could have, let's say in this example, we have new guests, and we could have guests that are ready to monetize. We could have guests that have perhaps become inactive. We could have guests that are based on a certain geography. You could have guests that you think are ready to socialize and spread the word. And then you could have loyal, engaged guests. So you can create as many of these as, of course, that you feel makes sense. And once you understand that, you target each of these segments with multi-channel messages that will drive them towards the marketing goals. So in the case of Mark, let's say Mark is a very active guest who shares his content across his network all the time, but he hasn't joined loyalty, so we're going back in time. And so the success strategy would be, well, we want to target guests like Mark with discounts based upon their interests to inspire them to become monetized users. And so you create messages that are very personalized, and that really makes the message feel as if it was designed specifically for that guest. So let's talk a little bit about profiles. So we want to basically, the way that profiles are built is it's a layer of multiple data points. And the idea is that you will get data from various points as we talked about. And the idea is that if you think about like building a puzzle from puzzle pieces, you want to build a true picture of that guest. And so not one single point might be giving you all the data that you need, but you get some points from, let's say, the social graph. You get some data points from the interest graph. You get some data from the guest. You get some data from the way that the app is being used by that guest. And so you slowly start to bring up a much bigger picture, a much better picture, or accurate picture of who that guest is and what they're likely to be interested in. And then once you have that, you want to cross-profile your guests. So, are they the same? You have different needs from a business guest versus a food and beverage guest or somebody who's traveling with their family. They will have very different interests and needs. A hotel family, or a guest traveling with their family may need an extra cot, whereas a business guest might require, a business access to the business office, and so forth and so on. So each of these will have different needs and different wants. So what type of data can we actually collect? Well, the sky's the limit, really. And this is really meant just to kind of give you a little bit of a in-depth view. It's not obviously all required, but this kind of gives you a sense of where data can come from. So there's obviously things like demographic data, so age, right, race, ethnicity, gender, education, and so forth, geography. Pretty basic stuff. Then there's things like psychographic data. So things like interests and lifestyle and attitudes and personality, these are a little bit more difficult. You can get these directly from the guest by having the guest self-identified. You can pull some of it from their social networks and so forth. And then we start to get into referral data. So how are those guests responding to loyalty programs? Are they doing reviews, things of that nature? Then you can get a little bit more sophisticated when you start tracking in-app behavior and also things around intention and desire state and so forth. This starts to get a little bit more complex, but you can go back to sort of more basic stuff, so behavioral things. So what are they doing inside the app? What's the purchase history like? What kind of trends? You know, is this somebody that, let's say, every time they arrive, they always buy breakfast at the hotel, or is this somebody, you know, that goes out to dinner at your restaurant every time they're at your property, or, you know, they book a spa every time they arrive, or do they tend to come in very late in the evening as opposed to, you know, 3 or 4 in the afternoon? So that's kind of what you're looking for. And then where are these people coming from? So the physical location, and you can layer that not only where they're from, but also what are they doing in across your property, because there are mechanisms to track or heat map even inside the property. So the sky's the limit, and there's lots of data that's available. It's a question of determining what makes sense for what you're trying to do. So with that, how are these messages personalized? Well, you take that data and you understand who that guest is and what type of guest that is, and you can create a personalized offer for each of those guests. That could be staying at the time at the same property, going through that same app, and each guest could get a completely different offer as a result. And these offers can get triggered by various campaign triggers, we call them. So it could be something that gets pushed out based on when the booking was done. Could be done at the point of check-in. You could send messages based on whether that guest is when that guest arrives on site. So they could be coming through the front door and they get a message. Could be something that when they arrive in the city. So again, there's various triggers that can be used to deliver that message. And so the idea is you want to create dynamic content that delivers sort of a unique and relevant message or content based on these various trigger points that could be, again, demographics, location, behavior, whatever we know about that guest. And so we know that our friends at the OTAs brag about having lots of big data about their users and browsing behavior, but they actually have very little in the way of small data, and that is really the detail about the guest and what they do and preferences and things like that. And this is a huge opportunity for hoteliers to really exploit and to drive this kind of dynamic content personalization away and down to the guests directly. And so messaging and re-engagement can go through unified messaging. That could be either email, could be push notifications, could be triggered by sensors or iBeacons across your property, and various channels that can be used to drive that content down through the use of mobile. This sort of gives you an idea how you can structure something like this in terms of a campaign. So you could have something like an express check-in campaign where you would take data that you know about that guest. So where's that guest from? Who are they, you know, in terms of demographic? When are they arriving? What kind of value do they have to your hotel? Do they have a specific membership? So you could use, let's say, you could offer different upgrades or different offers based on loyalty programs, based on how many stays they've had with you, based on where they're from, based on how many times they've or the type of activity they've done, or you could send specific offers just to specific individuals. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of what you can do in terms of targeting your guests once you know a little bit about them. And so the idea is that we start to track and build a complete guest profile with all the guest history, preferences, stays, interactions, and create sort of a digital guest passport, which can then be very valuable, which becomes very valuable to the hotel. so the next time that guest checks in. And so you'll right away know who that guest is, what they like, across multiple properties, not just the property that you are running. So they could be coming in from you. Let's say you're in LA and that guest has stayed 6 times at your Chicago property, and now this is their first time at your LA property. Well, this you can recognize that guest as being a loyal guest to your brand, as opposed to somebody just coming off the street. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more around some ways to engage with guests. So I mentioned this before. iBeacons are great technology that can be used, and these can be used in sort of very simple ways or very sophisticated ways. So once we have various data points, beacons basically are a little, they use a low voltage, if you would, or low-powered Bluetooth connection to the device, and they basically just tell the system where, if a guest has happened to pass, or if the device has passed that particular beacon. So they can be used in a simple way, like the guest walks in through the front door and it triggers a message. Could be something very simple like "Welcome back to the property," or it could prompt some type of offer, whether it's the guest is walking by the restaurant, or there's a special at the restaurant that night based on perhaps what else we know about that guest. So you can get very, very creative, and they can become quite sophisticated in terms of you could even have it pop up on the front desk saying, you know, the guest has arrived and here's who that guest is. So so lots of flexibility around what can be done with beacons. We can also do upgrades and upsells again. So this is part of the check-in process. These can be very simple, where you can offer the same type of upgrades to all the guests, or you can get quite specific in terms of offering very specific upgrades or upgrades to the right guests at the right time. And again, more personalized offers to drive loyalty and, of course, broader uptake in terms of acceptance or conversions. And then you can also use perks to send messages to a guest's phone. And so these can be rewards, these can be specials to loyal guests, or special types of offers, whether it's invites or whatever that could be. And of course, all of this feeds into a hotel-facing application that gives you insights. So what is actually happening through this mobile channel? So it's not just a one-way guest interface. You have to kind of see what's going on from a hotel perspective and see and access all those insights. So that's obviously important. So all of this is really driving to ROI. At the end of the day, understanding guests, being able to target them in a very specific way is really intended to build awareness, building awareness around what that guest can do at your property, driving engagement as a result of that, and ultimately to provide a much more tailored experience to that guest so that they then are able to, or you're able to monetize on that engagement with very specific offers, and ultimately have a much more satisfied customer. So that's the end of my presentation. So why don't we open it up to questions?
Thanks, Thomas. That was great. Very informative. And again, you know, these days, data really is key. And it looks like GuestDriven provides a lot of that. So with all these interesting points that you've made, we have a bunch of questions here. I'm just going to go through them. And if in terms of keeping the webinar down to about 45 minutes. If I don't have enough time to address all the questions, we do have them all available, and we will address them at the end if we don't get a chance to address them during the presentation. So thank you, everybody, for your questions. So Thomas, we have a question here that's asking, is there a desktop dashboard that hotels can use along with this tool?
Yes. So really, if we look at our platform specifically, there's basically two facets to it. So there is the the guest-facing application, which is a mobile application that the guests would use to engage with the hotel. But in parallel, there's a hotel-facing application that has a number of different components to it. So there is an analytics component that provides the hotel insight into what's happening with their mobile application as a whole. So what's the activity, what's the level of acquisition, what's the level of engagement, and what's the level of conversion. And then there's a section that gives more detail and insight into guests, obviously. And then there's the campaign setup, so where it allows you to set up these targeted campaigns based on filters. And of course, there's another section which allows the hotel to create offers. And lastly, there's also another section which allows that hotel to respond to those requests coming in from the application. So yes, so there's a fairly comprehensive set of features that the hotel would have access to manage the front end, if you would, of what's happening from the guest side of things.
Great. So next, do you provide security for all the personal information that you're storing on the guest?
Yeah, so yes, we do. It's we adhere to sort of the normal standards of privacy and security that are sort of generally accepted across anybody that's doing business in the internet. There are, I should point out, different levels of protocol. So there's different standards based on whether you're collecting or transmitting financial information versus personal information and so forth. But yes, we have encryption and so forth that are part of the protocols that we use to protect guest data.
Great. And how do you feel that this tool best fits in? Do you feel that it's best for a full-service hotel or something that's select service to utilize as well?
Well, it really depends on the hotel. And so I would say if you have a hotel, for instance, that has one level of rooms, so all the rooms are exactly the same. There's no layering of rooms, so you don't have basic, superior, presidential suite, and so forth and so on. And you just have one room, and it's, let's say, $99 a night, and you don't have a restaurant, and you don't have any of those type of things in which you could upsell that guest or create some type of promotional offers. There are, you're going to be limited in terms of what you can do in terms of monetizing on those guests. That's not to say that you cannot use the system to better service your guests, so whether it's doing a mobile check-in, which will make that process a little bit speedier up front, and collect that data to, again, better understand your guests. I mean, you can still use the platform to gauge feedback, to get reviews, to get social share, which will ultimately drive, hopefully, an improvement in terms of the overall performance of your property. That said, if you have a property that has amenities and has different levels of rooms, that you can then leverage this information to not only provide a better, more personalized service, but also to upsell, well, then you have a little better way to monetize as well. So it really depends on what your objectives are as a hotel, whether you're looking to understand your guests, be able to gauge feedback, or you're also trying to create more of a monetization opportunity through the use of that guest data.
Right. So something like with your app, what type of increases in revenues are hotels generally seeing?
So I had a statistic there. So businesses that use personalized targeted messaging see bumps up to 40% in terms of increase in terms of the take-up or the conversion on those targeted ads. We have seen 20 to 30% increases. Yes, you can get up to 40%, and if you're doing everything right. And so it really depends on the type of offers. We, of course, we can provide some guidance, but it's really up to also the individual properties to, depending on the type of program that they're offering. But there's no question that targeted promotions and offers have a significantly better impact and a certainly better traction or conversion than just non-targeted ads or promotions.
Right. So with the app itself, how does it integrate with RoomKey?
So we have a integration in terms of the PMS functionality. So what that means is that, for instance, when the guest is going through that check-in process, the data is pushed directly from our system directly into RoomKey, so that we can in real time validate that guest is a real guest at the hotel property. And so what that eliminates is the need for somebody to have to verify that in the PMS in RoomKey separately. So it provides a little bit more of a seamless and easier check-in process for that guest or for the hotel at the point of guest check-in.
Right. And this mobile app also provides the express check-in as well as checkout, or just check-in?
Correct. So we are just in the process of launching an express or mobile check-in product. And so our mobile check-in product will, what it basically does is, as the guest will be invited to check in 24 hours in advance of their stay. And through that process, we will validate the information that the property has and collect any other missing pieces that might be required to facilitate that check-in process. But the idea of this is a couple-fold. One is it's a very simple way to onboard that guest onto the platform. So it's a very good opportunity that everybody understands in today's world. You know, anybody that travels knows that, you know, how easy it is to check in for the flight, let's say, and it shortens the cycle once you arrive at the airport. Same idea is we want to confirm that the guest is en route. And again, through this process, hopefully build a little bit more profile data for that hotel to understand. And once that guest has gone through that check-in process, the hotel is able to, part of that process is to also upsell the guest. So if you have any kind of distressed inventory, you want to move that guest up into a better room at a discounted price for incremental revenue, or again, offer them any additional packages, whether it's food and beverage or some type of spa or any type of amenity that the hotel provides. Could be as simple as, in today's world, there's a very easy way for guests to be sort of upsold in terms of once they're on that way. They tend to ask for things that normally perhaps they wouldn't do in their day-to-day. So this is a very good process to do that and upsell that guest at the point of that check-in process and drive incremental revenue. So this is a new product that we'll be launching over the next couple of weeks.
That's great. Sounds like we have a really powerful tool in our hands, and with the integration with RoomKey, it sounds like we've been collecting data like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Thomas. I know I have a couple more questions here, but in trying to keep the webinar down to 45 minutes, we will just be addressing the questions at the end. Somebody will be contacting you by the end of the day to address your questions. And I just want to thank everybody for attending, and thank you, Thomas, for taking the time for presenting with us.
Thanks,
And we will, I will have this webinar posted on our RoomKey website by the end of day today. If you have any questions regarding GuestDriven or any other RoomKey product, please contact sales@roomkeypms.com or our toll-free number at 1-800-234-5695. Thank you, everybody.